It is a big day in the House of Representatives. This explains the full House. The House has dedicated the day solely to revive the conversation on what could be described as perhaps the most popular bills in the 10th National Assembly, the 4 tax reform bills scheduled for second reading.
It's a near-perfect document.
The debate begins with lawmakers largely speaking in support of the bills.
I saw it from where I came from as a subtle restructuring of this great nation. Also, a kind of a handshake across the Niger to our people.
Nobody knew that we will ever pass this bill in this House to go for second reading. But today, from what I've heard so far from our colleagues, I believe automatically this bill has gone for second reading.
There is need for us to harmonize the various tax bills that we have in this country. There is no denying the fact that most of the bills that deals with our taxes in this country are outdated.
No to the phasing out of relevant agencies of government that are popular and have also had a lot to deliver to the expectation of the people. Naseni, for instance, the TED Fund, for instance, the Speaker, the Leader of the House, I quote you, NIDA, for instance. I quote my leader for being so sagacious to say that these agencies will not be defaced. They will remain to continue to serve our people.
However, there are some concerns.
There is preponderance of ambiguity in this act because of the absence of interpretation clause. The interpretation clause is not robust, did not address the issue of derivation. What is derivation in this act?
The bills also seek to amend over 40 acts which have not been placed before us. Those 40 acts should be placed before us so that we compare against those bills.
I'd like to also advise that there could be a digitization of audited accounts in the new bill, which would stop the rampant or incessant frivolous issuance of account statements, audited accounts by companies. I also want to advise against executive issuance of exemption orders.
This 5% of oil sector contribution to the GDP is what constitutes 60% of funds or revenue to budgets. And again, it contributes 90% of your foreign exchange. Therefore, we have to do a lot to ramp up crude production, and that is what Section 85 seeks to.
All 4 tax reform bills are eventually passed through second reading.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The debate on the floor still suggests that there is still so much work to be done on issues like derivation, increase in value-added tax, and certain provisions that lawmakers fear could run in conflict with the Constitution. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
So that was how it went down on the floor of the National Assembly yesterday when the 4 tax reform bills finally, came up for debate. Now we understand that those 4 bills have sailed through and they're going straight up to the next stage, which is the public hearing. I'm sure that people will certainly have their, they will certainly have their ideas, and that's where they will bring those things to bear. Now, how much of it will be taken in is unclear, but that's where everyone gets to have a say if you do have an opinion. Well, I do have 2 gentlemen in the studio this morning who clearly have a say on the issues around the tax reform bills and a host of other issues, especially since political parties are already beginning to gear up towards 2027, even as they prepare for the off-cycle elections coming up in Anambra and one other state. But this morning, I have with me Professor Udenta, who is a founding National Secretary, Alliance for Democracy, and a distinguished fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Professor, very good to have you here on Sunrise Daily.
I'm happy to be with you once more, and I hope it will be an invigorating conversation.
I believe so. Yeah. Well, we also have with us the indefatigable Mr. Jacob Epelle, who is the founder of TAP Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
And
welcome back. Was it from Portugal?
I was in Portugal, yes. Well, it was inclusive migration, migration and development. And Nigeria is now the chair of what they call Rabat process, which is the EU-Africa collaboration on migration issues. There's a whole lot of unfolding events around migration. And I was happy when I spoke, the room was quiet about the inclusion of persons with disability in migration policy, even in development countries. And they were shocked to know what Nigeria have done in terms of inclusivity. I remember one thing that is of interest. I know that's not your subject, but I remember one interesting thing that happened. One of the EU members said, look, there's very non-existence of persons with disability in migration because of irregular migrations. Yeah. And I said, listen, you don't know. There are visible and invisible disability. There are people that you don't know have disability, but they can walk, they can run, sometimes they can see, but they have a huge challenge that they are dealing with internally. And I gave albinism as one of them, and unfortunately, as educated as she was, she didn't know albinism was a disability.
Interesting. I do know that wherever it is that disability is mentioned, you will be there to talk about inclusion. So gentlemen, this is what we've seen. After so much furore, you know, with the tax reform bills, the governor saying, no, you know, this is not inclusive. Inclusive is the word now. Enough. They're also, and the aggression, the initial aggression they had against the bill, it does appear now that with their own acceptance and their own, will I say, the changes that have now been made, the concessions that have been given, it's now all smooth sailing in the National Assembly. Should we be careful? Professor, I want to ask you, should we be careful? Do you think that the debate, would you say that the debate you heard from captured in that report was invigorating enough to say that we've given these bills a lot of thought?
I make a confession readily. I didn't watch the debate. I didn't listen. I didn't watch that.
Oh dear.
Concept. And I didn't miss anything, surely. Because you see, the tax reform base is one chunk out of what should be an entire package: economic transformation or inclusive growth. So if you pick the tax reform bills as one subject area and say, okay, did you watch the debate? Did you follow the dialogue? Did you even read the text? In isolation of possibly the philosophical foundation on which this economic model of President Bola Tinubu is founded. When it came, the first thing was subsidy is gone. That's a new liberal approach to governance. Second was naira flotation, and then regime of taxes and tariffs, now culminating with the tax reform bills. Are they situational economic models? Are they episodic or contingent? Do they occupy broken, incoherent spaces to say, has naira flotation delivered the goods? Has the removal of subsidy yielded the trillions that previous government never saw, never touched, because they didn't have the courage to do so, to stem the aggressive pursuit of foreign loans? Have we been borrowing more since we did that? Have we lifted the people from poverty? When we talk about multidimensional poverty of 80, 90 million, now almost 130 million. So increasingly with the tax reform base already in the works, with the flotation of the naira to yield more resources, with the first subsidy removal, the people are poorer. That is why I cannot take the tax reform bill on its own terms and merit. Take back in context in 1999, when this republic was founded. Between 1999 and 2001 was a radical attempt to retool the African landscape from OAU to AU. And three presidents led that charge: Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, Bouteflika of Algeria, and Thabo Mbeki of South Africa. They constructed this paradigm shift, that OAU doesn't fit, is not fit for purpose anymore for our time. They moved into AU. What was driving AU? The NEPAD. You've forgotten about NEPAD, New Partnership for African Development, built from the MAP, Middle African Program, and Omega Plan, which the Western world used Japan to bring in. The idea is to construct partnership between Africa and the globe institutions, global institutions, then the MDGs. From there to the continental NEPAD, then to the local. Every ministry in this country had a NEPAD office. Every agency had a NEPAD office, every department. Secondly, remember the robot debate that produced the needs document. What is needs? Economic empowerment development strategy. To the leads, the seats. So you have a holistic approach to governance. That is a Afrocentric vision in which we need to get Africa economy, Nigeria economy started. That led to exit from the Paris Club and the London Club of loans. We became loan free. Now we are dealing with tax reforms where the people be choked down with a enormity of taxes, even though it is a brilliant construction to have a holistic approach to tax administration. We look at the regime of taxes and they look at the poverty of the people. The middle class is wiped out. So that is why I do not ever, in my own consideration of issues of this nature, break them into segments, into situational or episodic, economic, spaces. I try to find some connection between what the president and his team have evolved in terms of not just tax reforms, in terms of managing the broad economy, political economy, in terms of human infrastructure built up, very other things that make an economy functional and inclusive.
Well, I don't know whether we're still, it's a good thing we're going to be talking about political parties and ideology. It's unclear, whether we have political parties which are built on ideologies to say, okay, when this party is in power, this is the path which is we think is most likely going to take.
The president must have a clear, holistic, organized and coherent philosophy of economic governance.
Yeah, but even the party, the party should have a role, shouldn't it?
The party, of course, in Nigeria, nobody takes a back role. It's as important as it is. The party hasn't got infrastructure to really build up policy orientation. The government has all the muscle, the ministers, the advisors, the technocrats around it. But when I'm going to deal with contingent, episodic, and incoherent development of the economy, then I'm lost.
It is interesting because I do know that issues around subsidy have been issues that have plagued government after government, even the government of Olusegun Obasanjo.
I agree.
Who tried
I said that the courage to do it, commendable. But having done it for almost 2 years, the trillions you released from doing it should have done what? Turn around the economy, reduce poverty, and increase humanity.
Have we really made trillions? That's a big question.
Where did you break down on it?
Because some people will say by the time we floated the dollar, that's
the Naira flotation.
Sometimes I'm not clear whether it's Naira or dollar. We floated.
When you floated in Naira.
Well, we floated something.
The Naira.
And we know
in order to close the windows.
The Naira was devalued as a result of that.
That's the second thing. That's
the second the question is, did we really gain anything as a result of subsidy removal?
Policy.
Yes.
The first one is subsidy removal is a big elephant.
Indeed.
When you take it away, you have to. The point is that if you are selling fuel at 146, the government is subsidizing almost 400% of that fuel you're selling.
Indeed.
If you take it away, push it up to 600 and something naira, now to almost 1,000 naira, the idea is that the government is making a huge chunk of money, 3-4 times more than the other previous governments. The idea is to now plug this money back to lead people from poverty, to have that inclusive growth we're talking about, in order to now even reduce the regime of taxes and tariffs. It's not just the tax reform based, the four of them.
Yes, that was the idea. What I'm saying is, at the time when this was done, because some people will say the timing is also very important. At the time when this was done, we were already in dire straits, weren't we? We're already in a place where we had very little choice. The NNPC was neck deep in debt, could hardly afford. In fact, from what a lot of people were saying, they said it was insolvent. As a matter of fact, the country was becoming insolvent.
I don't want to
touch. But what I want to ask is, when we now floated, whether the Naira or the dollar, when we did that flotation, did we really see any gains? Weren't the gains eroded as a result of that?
Okay, now, before I yield on this particular, space of conversation, by 2014, the GDP of this country was $3,000 and something. It's moved down to $800 and something over 10, 12-year period. The economy contracted massively. That's when there was subsidy. Remember 2012, when President Jonathan wanted to remove subsidy, there was a huge resistance. What he did was cut it down to 87 naira a liter. The resources even then, so modest, that came in the form of, remember, Shopee, tax reinvestment program, holistic approach, not palliatives, where you come with crumbs and give people money that they even account for. Social register that is not even verified by anybody, but Shopee even there to say, the little we're going to make out of that huge, which we have made, this is where it's going to go to. In education, in investment, infrastructure built up in road and rail construction. Now you have a huge radical shift of removing the entire subsidy regime you have liberated resources unimaginable in Nigerian history to have actually empowered the people, reduced multi-dimensional poverty, lifted them from the life they live. There's no middle class anymore in the country. Virtually people you know, including me, spend 60% on transportation. Take a boat in Abuja or Uber. 4 rides in a day is about 20,000 naira. How much do you earn? The point I'm making is that I can discuss with my brother and colleague here the tax reform base. I will not do that independent of a government of the day having a broad overview, holistic view how to manage this economy.
Okay, so but let me ask you, I don't know if you have a different perspective on this, because this is where we are now with the tax reform bills. 4 of them have sailed through. The question I was really asking is whether with this passage, of, with the acceptance of the governors now, because they were the major, I don't want to say obstacle, but yeah, they were the major obstacle in the way. With their own acceptance now, it does appear that this is smooth sailing. Do you see it as a sign of danger? Because some people would have said if the governors did not accept it, perhaps there will be greater scrutiny as to what precisely is going before the National Assembly.
It's in my way. There were some issues Prof raised that I was going to,
bring up as well.
A bit of a different opinion, because sometimes economic issues and interventions, we play academic exercise most times. It's completely different when you are in the room trying to run the economic policies and all that, but I'm not going there. In terms of the tax reforms, I have engaged...
You've already gone there. Yeah, well, so you will go there to the end, but go on.
Yeah, I mean, Prof did a fantastic analysis and presentation of and I agree with him in most of the things, but I also know that, I mean, he runs an organization, I run an organization. When you're in the driver's seat, it's never an easy stuff to do. However, the tax reforms, from my engagement with Professor Oyedele, I don't want to make the mistake of...
He's a mister, I think.
Yeah. It looks to me a brilliant exercise. It looks to me a transparent process. There are some gaps, no doubt, but Prof is honest about some of the issues that I personally picked up with him. He was on my podcast, The Hidden Sparks, and I did a thorough interview with him for 45 minutes. I was mostly interested in some of the challenges he had and all that. And I remember asking him one question. I said, are you afraid that this reform will not be implemented? He said, yes, I have that fear. You understand? He said, even the president have fear. Well, however, the process is not ended. It's just beginning. There's going to be a public hearing. So you will see the civil society interrogate this bill. The problem, too, is that many of us have not read the bill through and through. And sometimes we analyze from an empirical perspective, summarize text, and we don't have the holistic view of what is in the bill. I think it means well. I think it's something that can also help in rejigging the economy. Yes, there are some issues that, I mean, I'll be more than happy. I'm sure Prof, I've engaged him, but I'll be more than happy to share his contact with Prof to engage. So he is, to be honest with you, Oyedele is very open-minded, willing to engage. On the 25th, the committee is bringing themselves before the community of persons with disability in a town hall meeting. He's interested in knowing the gaps in the inclusivity of that bill. So I think it's something that can set us on a trajectory of a sound economic recovery. The problem sometimes is not very good policy. The problem is implementation of the policy. Sometimes too, the implementation is not the problem. The problem is the person that will implement the policy. Are you truly inclusive-minded, development-minded? Are you ready to roll your sleeve and do the work and get the result that people require? So as much as I agree, and Prof did, this is like a thesis, economic thesis, okay? But we need to drill it down to a practical, everyday step that we can take to ensure that we have a vibrant economy that focuses on the marginalized group and reduce this poverty even to 5%. You know, and I want to also say that my good friend, the Honorable Minister of Poverty Reduction, you know, has been trying his best. You know, there are gaps, there are issues and all that, especially with the social investment program and all that. You know, unknown to many of us, the funds for social investment program was not released to him. I don't know whether it's been released to him as of today. You know, so there are countless issues that borders on economic development that has to do with these tax reforms. I believe that if we have a comprehensive, inclusive tax reform approved for this country and is well implemented, we will get the dividends of it. The subsidy, I'm not against subsidy. I knew that there's no way this economy will thrive if we keep holding on to subsidy. My only concern with the government was, truly, the president came and said, subsidy is gone. After that statement, subsidy was never gone. It was never gone, you know. So at the end of the day, they came and agreed some sort of policy somersault. They came, oh, well, we were taking time to have a cushioning effect so that it doesn't really take a blow on the economy and all that. You know, I think governance is about
It was gone, but you know, the naira was floated and it made rubbish of the subsidy was gone. So Nigerians were paying higher, but you know, because the dollar had been floated or the naira had been floated, there was now trouble with NNPC and importation. But I think somehow now that is being stabilized with Dangote now producing locally. But you are going to say something.
Let me just quickly, very important contribution my great brother made here. Let me break it down in terms of the practical economic policies with direct impact on the people, as against academic, you know, speculative analysis and so on. When Obasanjo, and I'm talking to PDP or APC, this time I'm talking about individual.
I think you may raise your voice.
Yeah.
You think you're talking to Mike where you're talking to the
actually, when Obasanjo came on board, and we talk about NEPAD, that is not theoretical. That's a policy program that was domiciled in every department, in every agency, down to the local level. When we visited the Paris and the London debt clubs, the impact is to say we no longer look back and say we have debt servicing. We have a huge backlog of debt to service. That's number two. When you have needs program, that means we're not looking at one trajectory. We're looking at not just tax reforms, not looking at possibly monetization of government services. We're looking at the holistic approach to managing the economy. The problem we have today is because there is no connectedness between the variables that should be driving economic transformation. That is why the impact is not there. Secondly, when you root economic policies on the basis of Western models, the IMF and the World Bank provide huge resources, and they come with conditionalities. Those conditionalities actually retrench the government from the services to the people. That means education, health services, and so on. We're not no longer be under the purview of the government. This is reform based in certain regards there. That's why they resisted it in Naseni, resisted it in TED Fund. And if you remove some of those important institutional benchmarks that could cushion the difficulty in the transition, a lot could go wrong. Today, as I said, it's not academic, the middle class is gone. Today, multidimensional poverty is growing, not reducing. Capturing everybody. Today, you find that in spite of every effort of government, maybe the tax reform is a silver bullet that could solve the problem. The flotation couldn't do it, somebody couldn't do it, politics couldn't do it, because people are increasingly diminished, their humanity. So if this tax reform bill is a silver bullet at the government, then we should know that most of these other intervention, economic intervention, projects are not working. Maybe this one is the one they believe will work.
Well, Prof, when it comes to taxes, I do know that when, Nigerians always, will I say the conversations around it are never easy, because we know that taxes are the underlying, basis of the contract between citizens and the government of whoever is in power. The taxes is a contract that binds us together. We we pay our taxes, you're supposed to use it for the common good. Some people have said, oh, the fact that we've had oil for so many years has removed the focus of many Nigerians from
paying the taxes,
from paying
and then depending on oil.
Yes, and as a result, government too has been, would I say, left off not to carry out its responsibilities towards citizens, because we're not really paying for something. You would not hold the person accountable, who is supposed to be providing a service. But this is where we are now.
But you know about beating up a dead horse? You heard that saying? So I had to beat up. I'm coming. Had to beat up a dead horse.
What is the dead horse?
The dead horse are the people. For example, the guy who is a small farmer, who is a petty trader, the small scale business. No, I'm coming. For example, somebody manages to get an ATM to survive in the daily business.
Yes,
I'm coming. He goes there.
Yeah,
or she goes there.
And
then you have a lot of people.
Is that the taxes will be graded. Some people will be exempt from paying taxes. If you do not earn up to a certain threshold, you don't get to pay tax. The taxes will now be from a particular threshold up to a particular threshold.
But the model is not right. In Europe, very many countries,
even the minimum age,
we have a tax bracket of 40, 50, 60, in some instances % for the very super rich.
Yes.
And these are people who made their money through individual enterprise. The bulk of the money made in this country is from state monopoly capitalism. Almost all the papers, tax rebate, waivers, and so on. People can stay in their hotel rooms and then make a phone call. An oil well is given, and oil blocks are signed. So people make super billions in this country for not working very hard. What do they pay as tax? Very minimal. Sometimes they hide it under several headings. Then the masses who ought to be paid completely of this tax there are still expected incrementally to pay, when indeed there should be social redistribution of wealth.
Yes, but that's the question. Have you read this?
That's exactly what I was going to say, because I did.
Have you read them?
I appreciate that. I'm saying that if you do that,
it's not just an intellectual exercise.
No,
it's a very systematic with processes that will work.
I've seen the gradations. The point I'm making is that if you have a mindset to liberate resources in terms of tax, and you find a company that is based on government contracting for the past 20, 30 years, making fabulous money, producing super rich billionaires who build private universities and they pay very little in tax. Has the tax reform bills captured in totality how to liberate substantial resources from them, made in the system, that could not go to the common purse for the common good?
Prof, I tell you what I did. And I think all of us needs to go back and read that bill. The system, there's no system that is impeccable. There's no system that is perfect. But I tell you, the little that I have read and understood, it is a system that will work. The problem, you kept mentioning it, and I agree with you. The problem is the discipline of taxpayers to pay the tax, and a workable system that would capture payment, track, and produce the data that the Uncle Sam, that I call my friend Oyewole, can go back and say, this process is working. By the way, he doesn't, and I keep telling him, he doesn't want to be part of those that would administer what he has produced. I said, my friend, you end up becoming Joseph, because you can't
maybe that's the most academic one.
You can't reel out a dream and just drop it halfway. You just have to be there to guide them. So, Prof, to be honest with you, some of the things you're saying, as if you're working in tandem with what I have read, the little that I read, you have a more better way of handling academic document like that, But truly and really, it captured the essence of some of the things you've said. The problem is the taxpayers, are they going to be disciplined enough to follow those processes?
No, the institutions will be strong enough to ensure that they are disciplined enough in order to do the
policy provides
accountability.
Yeah,
if people do not do what they should do, the system is not based on accountability. Yeah. Exactly. That's why you find ministers who are supposed to ride 3 cars based on presidential dicta today float with 50, 100 cars.
Okay, so Prof, we should be talking about reducing the size of government.
It is not me,
which I agree.
Is to point out these issues. That's why we're public.
We can't be pointing out issues and we don't want to be part of the system, because we can't be talking about system that is not working and we're not really willing to roll our sleeves and make it work.
Brother, there's a division of labor.
There's
a division of labor. we are on studio. It's a public advocacy studio. It's a domain for enlightenment, for sharing ideas, for educating people.
Exactly.
That is massive contribution.
Yeah.
There are those who are in government. Policy makers, we hope they are listening and watching. They would have their pen and paper to note all these things. If the economic model is incoherent, if it's episodic in nature, if they're not aligned together, if the tax reform bill is good on paper, but in implementation, there are gaps there. Our duty is to point this out. Their duty is to now take up.
Let me ask you this. I mean, while it is that you have, you see the positive side, you're optimistic because you have engaged with Mr. Oyewole, and
I'm not speaking for him.
Yes, I know it has since left his purview. It is now in the National Assembly, and where all of the rest of the discussions will be taking place is the National Assembly.
Exactly.
So even if people with disabilities have an issue with the bill, or after he's briefed them, where they're going to have to take those issues to will be the National Assembly. Going by what we know of our system, because it's one thing for us to be made promises to, and people are supposed to be more involved when their taxes are paid, or when their money, their personal money is involved. Do you think that systems are also being put in place for us to hold our leaders truly accountable, or do you think that they're still going to be very aloof and far away from the people in such a way that we will be finding it very difficult to get any accountability from them?
Well, to hold people accountable, you need very strong institutions that are working, and there are opportunities to penalize those that are not following the rules of that, whether it's institution or systems, But meanwhile, going back to what the question you asked, no, what Oyewole is doing has not ended with the National Assembly. There's still an opening for a rejigging, for a bit of correction. That's why he's going to the public hearing. At that point, he has not closed shop. He still have to work until the bill is ready, passed, and maybe he will step back. So that's why we're also engaging him, because there are gaps. There are gaps. The complexities of tax forms, most of the things they are proposing are going to be online. How many Nigerian websites have accessible format for persons with disability? So that's what we're saying. There are incentives that are going to come out of this tax that should go to the very poor and the marginalized society. How do we track those? How can we ensure that persons with disability, and I'm not only advocating for persons, women, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, women, youth, how do we ensure that they will benefit from the dividends or the tax savings that will come out of this process? That's my focus. And like I said, me and Prof was saying, Prof, when I felt the need to engage government to ensure that we have, take for instance, inclusive education policy, albinism policy. I didn't just formulate those policies, got them approved, and sit back. I followed up. Today, in Ministry of Education, there's a budget for inclusive education. There's a budget for albinism. And I'm saying this to say that, many times we argue that, Nigeria, the problem is that there are too many policies, no implementation. Policies don't implement it. It doesn't implement itself. The same person who advocated for that policy, who is desiring to see implementation, must roll his sleeve and follow through until we see implementation. I did the first albinism policy 5 years, nothing happened. We just reversed, and now it's in the budget. I'm part of the committee. Meanwhile, I don't allow government to send me anything. Let them hold their money so that but I know who to hold accountable. So accountability mechanism are there. We need to activate it.
Okay.
So we need to bring people like Prof. Prof, I think the problem is that people like you sometimes shy away from being part of the process.
Let me tell you the problem. Let me tell you why I don't shy away from being part of the process. And let's talk a bit about accountability, Mogbe, which you laid out here. I love your spirit and the sense of passion you bring to bear on it, and then the track record of your own engagement in that field of vulnerable groups and so on. Basically, accountability is a systemic issue. It is not that the systems are not supposed to be accountable in Nigeria. They're designed not to be accountable. The entirety of the design, the structural design, is to lack accountability. That is why you find somebody, a pension guy, reform guy, 123 billion. What did the judge give? 213 million, 320, just pay. Just go. He signed the check and left. How about the former accountant general who had taken about 4 titles, since he has 120 billion on his head? It is not incidental. The jurisprudential layout of the system, the criminal justice system, which is the number one accountability, designed to punish the poor and reward the rich. Take governors who live off things. It takes 12 years to try them. But it takes only 1 month to jail somebody who stole a goat or a cow. So accountability is not that something to say, oh, with the passion and energy, which is unique in your field, but broadly speaking, it is important for us to appreciate by keeping our voice very loud. The system is designed not to be accountable, and people break the law with impunity. But when you have accountability, designing a system that works like in China, if you steal, you pay, whether you're rich or poor. A billionaire is sentenced to death and is shot. That's what the law says. But here, when you have law that is blind to the poor, but wise-sighted for the rich and excuse them, a system you find daily abused. And you find a regime of even take these palliatives and social, safety net programs where nobody even knows where the register comes from. How many people are captured there? Who registers them? Who executes them? The minister may be very good at the top level, generating policy at the level of implementation. Look at the last one. The lady, remember?
Well,
so you find that it is mind-boggling that you find an economy where so much resources is generated internally, where resources are freed from fuel subsidy removal, where trillions are pouring from foreign loans, and poverty is escalating, and human capacity diminishing, and the middle class is gone. Something is structurally wrong with that kind of system.
I'm going to ask you, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts, because Ayo is part of this conversation, and I know that he needs to get a question in. Ayo, over to you now.
Thank you, Maokwe. Prof, I'm going to start with you, and I may interject you a little bit from time to time. Most of the time when we're talking about these tax reform things, we tend to forget that it's not just the federal government that is affected. States collect taxes too. And it would seem like most of the time when we talk about these issues, we're only talking about the responsibilities of the federal government and all of that. So, in this whole conversation around taxes, levies, and the rest of them, don't states have a role to play? You recall, of course, that in the whole process of these tax reforms, the governors were up in arms at some point, and they came to a particular, some kind of agreement with the federal government on this, hence the process, the progress we're seeing in the National Assembly. So, what role should we be giving to states? How accountable should we be holding the states, and not only the federal government in this matter?
I just quickly to toss out my viewpoint in this matter. Take the example of the local government autonomy vis-a-vis the Supreme Court ruling and what is captured in the text of the Constitution. That is one area where you find the universalization of a model of resource management that says it will not go to the states anymore. It goes direct to the local. That is a powerful federal center dictating to the federating units, the subnationals, how these resources should be managed at the local level. That is number one. You take EFCC. Some states took EFCC to court and said, your jurisdiction doesn't cover us. The Supreme Court ruled otherwise. Said, no, EFCC covers your family in your smallest village. So the intrusive nature of the power of the center is why people are calling for restructuring. That if you have this list that is exclusive to the federal in relation to what is there for the states, the imbalance is astronomical. But they balance it in order to hold the states accountable. They will not go cap in hand to the federal begging for money. We do hear, I'm not going to be fact-checked because this is something we pick from here and there, that there are certain hundreds of billions, which the federal government keeps back from the federation account and then gives out to certain states as grants, as loans, as aids. Those states got this thing, why others don't get? Mokwe and your team, please, fact check me on this. I'm not being absolute. There's a certain amount of money. Look at what Rufai said, for example. But I know why the governor who I had to put there is doing what he's doing. There's 150 billion he collected. I know there are people who push back to say, you collected too. So the debate is not whether a governor collected 150 billion from somewhere, not the one that is shared every month.
Prof, the issue being raised here, if you can hear me, Prof, my apologies. Just 1 second, Prof. The issue being raised here is whether or not states themselves should be held accountable for taxes. So of course, just as you said earlier, there is no such thing. Just a second, Prof. There is no doubt about the fact that there is no absolutely perfect law, no absolutely perfect system. We tinker with it on the go and the rest of them. But the issue I'm asking, just to stay on the topic, is the issue around the taxes. The tax laws that we have, everyone agrees that they are obsolete. And we've been having these tax laws for a long time. I'm sure you saw that video that made the rounds at some point. That one truck bearing goods to different parts of Nigeria had about 60 to almost 100 taxes, levies, and what have you, that they had to pay on the go, along the road. So the whole idea, from what we have been made to understand by Mr. Oyedele, is let's reduce these numbers so that we don't continue to have this multiplicity of taxes that will continue to affect the prices of goods and services, particularly interstates. So that's why I'm asking whether or not we should include the states, seriously so, in this conversation and not just tackle the federal government, which of course we cannot say that they don't have their issues.
Like I said, in principle, that point is well noted. I think it's axiomatic. It's a self-evident truth, no doubt whatsoever. The challenge, if you think in terms of systems, is that on paper, the federal government received a certain percentage of money from the revenue allocation system. But in reality, many people believe that the federal resource base is not close to 70% and not 50%. When you see that many of these powerful agencies, the customs, the MPA, etc., do not report fully, NMPC is very opaque. So by the time you find that the stakes and the FGs are managing less than 30% in reality, so you are not to focus more energy on that to say, do we need to keep a system that is so imbalanced? We have a bloated center and there's subnational
I think there is a different, I think there is something to understand, Prof. Just a second. I think there is something to understand, because we have also been made to understand, Prof, that there is a difference between the federal government and the federation. The federation is the federal government and the state governments, from what we have been made to understand. So when they talk about the federation account, they are talking about an account that belongs to both the federal government and the states. And that is the one, that's why they say federation account allocation and fiscal committee and all of that. That's what I think that means. Well, whether it's on paper or not, so far, no state has been able to take the federal government to court on that. I stand to be corrected. But let me come to you, Mr. Epelle, on this matter. Perhaps the issue here is that of the balance. Just as you both have said, for the education and the understanding of Nigerians, so that they can take, they can know who to call to account from time to time. We've been talking about the states, talking about the federal government and all of that, but to a large extent, every time someone is talking about the National Assembly, someone is talking about the president, but the states have quite a chunk that they take as well. Do you think we have that mechanism to take on, call to account the activities of the states? You just said here now that CSOs are going to take on the National Assembly on the tax reform bills. I'm not sure the same happens when state assemblies make laws, or at least not as severely. Consequently, you know, laws just get passed and they're already binding on the people before they know what's happening.
Yeah, very good question. Really and truly, I agree with you that a lot more responsibility should also be on the shoulders of the state and the local government in terms of whether they have the right mechanisms and the systems to run their affairs and for us to hold them accountable. Very little, I must say. Even the federation account system, I think, is also archaic. There's a need to revamp it, revisit it, take into cognizance what is today. Take, for instance, what the AI is doing in technology. There's a need for an interrogation of the federation system. There's a need for states to adopt their own system that works and holds them accountable, but deliver the dividends of their leadership to the people. The problem is the people are totally, absolutely, objectively impoverished. And so whatever they try to do, we are not seeing the result. Meanwhile, many of them are living larger than life, driving expensive cars, going on expensive trip. Their children are in the best of schools. They drive a car that you begin to wonder whether these people are businessmen or politicians. So these are some of the things, and nobody is holding them accountable. Nobody is challenging them. There are no entrenched civil society in the subnational and the local government and the local government level. And that's why some people like me, I'm just not the Abuja type of CSO that wants to be flash in the pan. What are we doing? Just this month alone, we've opened an office in Rivers State and Delta because we want to look at what the state is doing and what the local government are doing. So we all have a responsibility, just like we are having this discussion. Some of them are listening, but we need to drill down and produce a workable mechanism that will address the gap we are discussing here. If we discuss from now till tomorrow and we don't have a workable, doable system that we can not only checkmate or fact check, but come back to say, this is where it has led us, is not according to what you said it should be. So we should be thinking of a system that works.
But
currently,
however,
this system needs to be
Epelle, there's something that Prof mentioned earlier, and I think it is a very, very important one. The question of balance. The question of, I don't know whether it's equity or equality. One in which there is a balance between what the federal government is getting and what the state governments are getting based on their responsibilities, as well as what the local governments are getting based on their responsibilities. 774 local governments that we have in the country. So what's your take on that? And if you were to make any recommendation, say you find yourself in the room for the public hearing, what would be your recommendation in that regard? I know that there are some recommendations in the bill, but what would be your recommendation in order to work that balance so that one doesn't feel hard done by?
Yeah, Ayo, number one, there must be a transparent process. We should be able to know till date. I don't think what we're trying to do sometimes is postulate, and sometimes exaggerate. There has to be clear figures, facts and figures of what is happening. Take, for instance, in the federation account. We don't know. Nobody knows. There's also the need for both the State Assembly is a very weak, dilapidated political organ of the state. The governor determines what they do. If he doesn't like you, you're removed. If he doesn't like the fact that he will be held accountable by these lawmakers, he would create a fashion. So when they are weak institutions, the executive will go to town and dance whatever masquerade they want, and nothing happens. So how many governors have been held accountable, brought to book, sent to jail? Not one of them. What they do is, once they leave the political party that elected them and they feel that the center is different, they just migrate and move to the center.
What are you saying about this balance? 2 sentences or 3 I can make there.
Okay.
We can deal with these small issues, even as important as they are, holistically, when you hear people talk of restructuring, particularly, that is what they're talking, what they have in mind. If the constitutional framework does not reduce the power of the center in terms of responsibilities and re-empower the subnationals or the federating units, there's no amount of accountability or tinkering that will work. If the center is having reduced to collecting rates and duties, import duties, foreign policy and defense, as it was in the First Republic, so that the bulk of work on education, on healthcare, on agriculture goes down to the subnational or the regional body, regional governments then, you can now see a dramatic shift in terms of the money available to the federation in the federation account, and then the little that the center will hold to maintain 3-4 key services and the mass of the money going down there. So he can't do that even at this debate going on the tax reform, because already the Constitution has prescribed in the exclusive list and the concurrent list the massive responsibilities of the federal center. Once that is the way it is, you find that the president is sitting on a pot of money that sometimes he uses and behaves in the way he likes. To go further simply means physical federalism. That's what they call it, physical federalism. How do you reduce this dependency on the center that every month people come with briefcases and share money? It is not done anywhere in the world. You have to hold substantial part of the resources you produce at their own local level and then yield to the center a small amount to maintain the defense, maintain the foreign policy, and so on. So until that is done, we should be doing some cosmetic measures at this stage.
Prof, shouldn't we also be looking at our legal system, the laws that will enable some of these brilliant ideas that we're talking about? Are there laws, for instance, the restructuring? I'm not interviewing you.
I know. This is a conversation we're having. It's important.
So I'm thinking, at the back of my mind, do we have the enabling laws that would truly activate these positive
the moment you retextualize the Constitution, you redraft it.
Exactly.
Then the laws will flow.
Well, we saw the controversy that happened with regards to the tax reform bills, because some people were saying, oh, that was an attempt at restructuring through the back door. When we saw the derivation principle, beg your pardon now, the VAT and how it was supposed to be shared, 60% to derivation, 20% to 30% equity, and 20% to population. And we saw that the governors were up in arms, because some people were saying that the states that do more, work more, should be able to, get more. And then, the conversation was that, but it's because of the fact that a lot of headquarters are situated in Lagos and a number of other states, it will unfairly affect some states where work is done, but tax is remitted at the headquarters. So we've seen that that sort of conversation hold. We've seen that they've finally been able to, have a middle ground of some sort. And the governors are happy, but I'm saying that, do you think that we're still on edge enough to pay sufficient attention to what is currently happening in the National Assembly in such a way that it doesn't just sail smoothly through and, it's I all the way?
No, the problem is that you are federalizing, you are centralizing the federation.
Prof, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts. I have asked a question when I really should be closing, but gentlemen, it's a conversation that's not going away. We have to go at this point now, not Sunrise Daily. We're going to take a break on Sunrise Daily, but we're taking you, the Sunrise Daily is taking you all the way to Adamawa, for the coronation and presentation of the staff of office to the Emir of Meha. So if you're on our DSTV platform, that's where you'll be going to right now. And if you're still on other platforms, you can still watch the rest of the conversation. But gentlemen, I have to thank you because our segment is up. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Professor Odenta, who's the founding National Secretary, Alliance for Democracy, and a distinguished fellow at Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, all of which he brought to bear. Thank you so much for coming. And of course,
Lagos,
my dear Mr. Epelle, thank you so much for coming on the program. He's the founder of TAF Africa. I know in Ijoma Ekwa is wondering, who's this girl? You're taking my tax reform. You're talking about it. But she has more details for you on business news on Sunrise Daily. Please stay with us.